I just can't believe that you think that you and Chandler know me and Rachel better than we know you.
Well, we do.
Let's talk about one of the most famous show in 90s, Friends. Looks like the easiest show in the world. 6 people, 1 couch, endless laughs. Well, behind the scenes, the entire series was hanging by a thread. Today we're going to talk about the top 10 Friends series facts that most of you didn't know. The cast almost changed, the show nearly had a completely different identity, and several moments that fans love today were created out of pure chaos, luck, or panic. And once you hear what was really happening backstage, you'll never watch the show the same way again. Fact number 1, the show almost had a completely different name. Before Friends became the worldwide phenomenon we know today, the show went through an identity crisis so intense, it almost felt like the writers had no idea what they were creating. The original pitch wasn't warm or cozy at all. In fact, the first title was Insomnia Cafe, a name that made the whole show feel darker and far more chaotic. Early drafts also described the characters as completely different people, with personalities that barely resemble the ones fans fell in love with. Then came 2 more potential names, Across the Hall and 6 of 1. Each version shifted the tone, the relationships, and even how frequently the characters appeared together. It was as if the creators were throwing ideas at the wall, hoping one would finally click. What's wild is how close the show came to launching under one of those early names. And if it had, the entire vibe, and probably the show's future, would have been unrecognizable. But that wasn't the only thing that nearly changed everything. Fact number 2, Jennifer Aniston nearly quit before season 1. Long before Rachel became the face of Friends, Jennifer Aniston was stuck in a situation that almost pulled her away from the show entirely. At the exact same time she filmed the Friends pilot, she was already committed to another TV series called Muddling Through. And here's the wild part. If that show performed even decently in ratings, Aniston would have been locked into her contract and legally forced to leave Friends before it truly began. NBC executives were so desperate to keep her that they quietly hoped the other show would flop. Every week, the network was watching the numbers, praying they wouldn't lose the actor who was supposed to bring Rachel to life. Meanwhile, Aniston was stuck waiting, unsure which show would win and whether she'd be allowed to stay with the cast she already felt connected to. When Muddling Through finally failed to take off, she was released from that contract, and Friends got the star it needed at the exact last moment. But that wasn't the only close call lurking behind the scenes. Fact number 3, the cast's salary battle almost tore the show apart. What most fans don't realize is that the Friends cast didn't start out as a united group earning the same paycheck. In the early seasons, the salaries were uneven, and behind the scenes, that imbalance was quietly creating tension. Some cast members were paid significantly more than others, even though the entire show depended on the chemistry of all 6 actors. Things reached a breaking point before season 3, when negotiations threatened to split the group. Agents pushed different deals, talks got messy, and it almost reached the point where a few cast members considered walking away. Then something unexpected happened. David Schwimmer stepped in. He was one of the highest paid actors at the time, and instead of taking an even bigger raise, he suggested the cast negotiate as a single unit. Equal pay, equal value. It was a huge risk. He was turning down money, and the others were being asked to link their careers together in a way most actors never do. But the move worked. Not only did it fix the growing divide, it set the foundation for one of the strongest ensembles in TV history. Years later, that decision paid off. Literally. By the final season, each cast member earned $1 million per episode, a level of unity and negotiating power rarely seen in Hollywood. But money wasn't the only conflict shaping the show from the shadows. Fact number 4, Matthew Perry was fighting a hidden battle the Burchard world didn't see. While Chandler Bing was making millions laugh every week, Matthew Perry himself was going through something much heavier, something he managed to hide so well that most viewers never noticed until years later. Behind the quick jokes and sarcastic one-liners, Perry was dealing with a personal struggle that quietly grew throughout the seasons. He later admitted that there are whole stretches of filming he barely remembers, even though he was on screen almost every episode. Fans started noticing subtle clues, his weight shifting dramatically from one season to the next, sudden changes in energy, and moments where he seemed physically present but emotionally drained. The cast knew something was wrong, and many of them tried to protect him from public attention, shielding him whenever the pressure grew too intense. Even crew members adjusted shooting schedules just to give him breathing room, something almost unheard of in sitcom production. Yet despite everything he was going through, Perry still delivered one of the most iconic performances in TV history. The fact that he held the character together so flawlessly while battling so much privately makes his role even more remarkable today. But the emotional struggles weren't the only hidden force shaping how the show was made. Fact number 5, the live audience could completely change a scene. Most people think Friends was filmed like any other sitcom, but the live audience played such a powerful role that it sometimes rewrote entire moments on the spot. Every episode was recorded in front of hundreds of fans, and their reactions acted like a real-time test. If a joke didn't land, the writers didn't hesitate. They stopped everything, rewrote the line, and tried again. Some scenes were reshot 5 or 6 times just to capture the perfect laugh. And it wasn't only comedy that caused trouble. Emotional scenes were even harder. There were moments where the audience reacted so loudly, crying, gasping, or clapping, that the cast couldn't keep their pacing straight. Filming Rachel and Ross's breakup, for example, took far longer than expected because the crowd kept responding with shock every time a line hit too close. Sometimes the energy from the audience helped elevate a scene, but other times it slowed production to a crawl. Cast members have said it felt like performing live theater and filming a TV show at the same time, with hundreds of strangers silently deciding whether a joke survived or got cut. The audience wasn't the only unexpected influence behind the show's most iconic moments. Fact number 6. Ross was written for David Schwimmer, but he almost walked away. One of the wildest behind-the-scenes facts is that Ross Geller wasn't just another auditioned role. The writers actually created the character specifically for David Schwimmer. They had seen his earlier work, loved his quiet, awkward charm, and decided he was the perfect fit for a slightly unlucky, dinosaur-obsessed romantic. In their minds, Ross didn't just exist as a character, he existed as Schwimmer. But here's the twist. At the exact time Friends was being developed, Schwimmer was seriously considering stepping away from television altogether. He had just gone through a run of projects that left him exhausted, and he was ready to focus on theater instead. So when the creators approached him, he didn't jump at the opportunity. In fact, he hesitated so much that the producers started preparing backup plans, just in case he turned them down for good. It's almost surreal to think about. One of the most recognizable characters in sitcom history, the guy whose breakups, breakdowns, and jokes defined so much of the show, was seconds away from never existing. If he had said no, Ross might have been played by someone entirely different, or written in a completely new direction. But Schwimmer eventually took the role, and Friends gained the character who ended up shaping some of the show's biggest storylines. And speaking of storylines that almost went in a very different direction, fact number 7, Phoebe and Joey almost became a real couple. For years, fans joked about Phoebe and Joey having the strangest chemistry on the show, sweet, unpredictable, and always a little chaotic. But what most people don't know is that behind the scenes, the writers seriously considered turning their playful dynamic into a full romance. It didn't start as some grand plan either. It began with small, improvised moments during rehearsals, glances, jokes, tiny hints of chemistry that weren't in the script but felt too natural to ignore. As these moments stacked up, the writers started to wonder if Phoebe and Joey should become a secret couple, sneaking around and surprising everyone later in the series. Some versions of the idea were lighthearted, while others leaned into a deeper emotional bond that would have changed the entire direction of both characters. Even the actors admitted later that they played certain scenes with hidden flirtation, just in case the writers chose to go all in. In the end, the idea was dropped, mostly because the writers felt the show already had 2 major relationships and didn't want to overload the storyline. But the fact that this pairing came so close to happening explains why so many scenes between them feel charged with something extra, something that never officially made it into the script, but definitely lived between the lines. And that wasn't the only hidden rule shaping the characters behind the fact number 8, the secret Joey isn't dumb, rule that shaped his character. Joey Tribbiani might be one of the most lovable goofballs in TV history, but the version fans know wasn't the original plan at all. Early drafts of the show painted Joey as extremely clueless, almost cartoon-level silly. The writers quickly realized that if they kept him that way, he'd become a one-note character who existed just to deliver jokes, not someone the audience could genuinely root for. So they created an unofficial rule behind the scenes. Joey could be simple, but he could never be stupid. He needed to be innocent, not clueless. Optimistic, not empty-headed. That small distinction completely changed how he was written. Instead of making him the butt of every joke, the writers gave Joey moments of surprising wisdom, emotional honesty, and loyalty that rounded him out and made him feel real. This rule also protected the character in scenes where simpler writing might have pushed him into exaggerated comic relief territory. If a joke made Joey look too far gone, it was rewritten. If a moment felt off-brand, they adjusted it until he was funny without losing his heart. That balance is exactly why Joey became such a fan favorite. He was never meant to be the smartest guy in the room, but he was never meant to be the joke of the group either. And speaking of rules, one unexpected design choice created a visual rule that defined the entire show. Fact number 9. Monica's apartment color was a psychological trick. Monica's apartment is one of the most recognizable sets in TV history, but that iconic look wasn't chosen just because it felt right. The producers intentionally picked the bold purple walls as a psychological trick to keep viewers glued to the screen. According to the set designers, softer or more realistic colors made the apartment blend in too much. Nothing stood out, and the scenes didn't feel as alive on camera. Purple, on the other hand, was unforgettable. It made the space instantly recognizable, even in quick flashes, and it created an energy that matched the fast pace of the show. The designers said they wanted a color that would make people remember the apartment long after the episode ended. And it worked. So well, in fact, that the apartment itself became as iconic as any character. What's even more interesting is how carefully the rest of the room was balanced to support that bold choice. Every prop, every piece of furniture, even the lighting was adjusted to make sure the purple popped without overwhelming the actors. It wasn't just interior design, it was strategy. And while that design choice shaped the look of the entire series, the final episode had a moment that almost changed the way the show ended forever. Fact number 10, the final scene was changed at the last minute. The ending of Friends looks effortless on screen. 6 keys on the counter, a final walk out of the apartment, and one last joke at Central Perk. But behind the scenes, the finale was far from simple. The producers originally planned a much heavier goodbye, including flash forwards that showed where each character ended up years later. There were versions with marriages, babies, and even scenes that wrapped up every storyline with a tidy bow. But when the cast read those early drafts, something felt wrong. The creators realized that revealing the characters' futures actually made the ending feel smaller, not bigger. So, only days before shooting, they rewrote the last moments to be more open-ended, leaving the characters' futures to the audience's imagination. It was a risky choice, but it kept the spirit of the show alive. Honest, simple, and emotionally real. Filming that final scene, however, was anything but calm. The cast cried between takes, crew members struggled to keep straight faces, and the set itself became a place no one wanted to leave. There's even footage of the actors breaking down as soon as the cameras cut. Several emotional lines had to be removed because they made the scene too heavy for a sitcom finale. What viewers saw was the polished version, a gentle goodbye. What happened that day was much more raw and far more human. And with that, the show that almost fell apart before it began closed its doors in a way no fan would ever forget. All right, guys, that's the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. Tell me which fact you didn't know or which one you liked the most. I love reading your comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.